You're listening to Jack of All Trades, Master of Nothing, a podcast that celebrates those who do a little bit of everything. We bring together creative people who followed the unconventional path, pursuing multiple trades, sometimes at the same time. So get ready to be inspired, because as the saying goes, master of none is often better than master of one. Hello, 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 and how are we doing this week? Thanks for tuning into Jack of All Trades podcast. My goodness gracious, it is so freaking hot. Oh my God. I'm currently, again, I said this like kind of in a couple of the episodes at the beginning, but I'm recording these out of order and feel like life has been a total absolute cluster. Like in the past couple weeks, right now when I'm recording this, I'm like in the middle of some intense rehearsals and have been back to New York City and am personally trying to rebrand my website for my business. And anyway, I'm happy to get these episodes out to you, and I'm just ready for you guys to hear this conversation. Jessi Magick, who is the CEO and Muse of Wild Essence Magic and Hedonism Wild. Jessi is such a cool frickin' person. Holy crap. We go into more detail during the episode, but I know Jessi because she's one of my voice students, and I know her really all thanks to Emily Kristen Morris, who I started teaching with after I interviewed Emily in our season 1 of Jack of All Trades. Jessi's one of the students that I teach all over the world, and she's currently based out of Costa Rica, and she's just such a cool spiritual leader that is so needed right now, and we had such a wonderful, interesting conversation about her viewpoints and her teachings, and she has a couple offers out, and I can't wait for you guys to hear more from her in her own words. And honestly, I don't even want to like talk a whole lot before this because it's just like so juicy and valuable and like delicious, this conversation. So without further ado, let's get into our wonderful conversation with Jessi Magick. Hey, Jessi, welcome to Jack of All Trades podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful that you asked.
Yeah, so you're in Costa Rica right now in your house, right?
I'm in my house in Costa Rica. It's been almost a year that I've been in this house, but I spent most of last year in various houses deciding which one I wanted to be in. But this one I'm renting. We're actually getting ready to buy land and build a house. That's the next thing that we're doing. So I'm excited for that too.
Wow, that's amazing. And when did you move to Costa Rica also, by the way? I think you told me before, but
like officially, I packed the big suitcases in September of last year. But I had spent February and March and May and June. Like I had spent a lot of last year staying for extended periods of time. And then I just fell in love with it. And I said, I don't know when I'm coming back. I'm just going with a lot of stuff. So, and then I just keep having people visit me and bring me all sorts of random things. Although the more time passes, the less things I tend to need from the States because I've learned how to not need a lot of things that I used to. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, that's neat. Yeah, learning to really become a Costa Rican civilian, yeah. I guess would be the...
Kind of, yeah. I work with what's here rather than like whatever I was used to. And some things that I once upon a time needed, I don't need because my body is healthier here.
Interesting, because of like the way the food is, it's just like all natural and not like processed and stuff.
It maybe is the food, the quality of the air, the being outside so much, the jungle in itself, the medicine of the jungle. I can't even put into words how special this place is. Like the first time I ever came here, I remember driving around this big mountain and some of the leaves on some of the trees were bigger than my body. And I was like, that is the biggest leaf I have ever seen in my life. And then like everything is kind of like that. All of the animals are a little bigger because there's just such an abundance of fertility here in every way. So it's like it's been medicinal. I came down here for my own medicine to try to really care for myself, my wellness as best I could.
Yeah, we're gonna get into your story as far as like I mean, you're such a fascinating person. Like I learned little tidbits from you for the listeners. Jessi is another one of my students that this season's a lot of me interviewing some of my favorite students and like all the amazing different things that they do and how I like cross paths with you. So just to the audience to like get to know you a little bit in your background, can you give us I guess a brief history of your like early life, and kind of, I know you'd mentioned before that you were in business and that you've always, this podcast is a lot about mindset and how you kind of got to be the person that you are today. So like, how did your early life, we've talked about that a little bit, but whatever you want to share about how that's led that here.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Connecticut, and both of my parents are martial artists. They're both like world champion martial artists. They're both black belts. So I grew I grew up in a dojo, basically. I grew up like in a dojo with like random students sitting with me while both my parents took turns, teaching karate classes. And my father owned a karate school that was pretty well known in the area, and then he also worked for a pretty big corporation making sealants and adhesives and stuff for different kind of cars and machinery and things like that. And he really worked his way up from the bottom to the top of that company, which was really kind of a cool story for him. And my mom has just been a phenomenal teacher of martial arts for such a long time. So I grew up in a household of very high achieving, very productive, very like list and goal oriented humans that were also both very athletic and I would say linear to some extent in their way of thinking. As far as like you do this and then you do this and then you do this and you check the boxes. And I was kind of the only strange artsy child that of all of the cousins that I had in the like I was the one who wanted to do all of the most artistic things and everybody else was like in their sport, right? And I tried doing sports, but it never was something that I enjoyed. I was put in a lot of things. I did do martial arts for years. I was put in a lot of different sports, but I was never in love with it. And all I really wanted to do was tell stories and sing songs and paint pictures and things like that. So it didn't really fit into the mold of the way that my family thought of the world, I think. However, I would catch my dad every once in a while drawing. He taught me how to draw a horse. I remember this very vividly. And now in his 70s, he's drawing again. So there's this like, I know there was a thread there, but I think it kind of got worked out early and there was not a lot of encouragement for him to be an artist. So I grew up in a home that was kind of not equipped for me to function the way that I wanted to function, which was very fluidly. So I was taught most of my organizational mindset, which it is strong, was conditioned. It was very much like, this is how you fold your clothes and put them in a line kind of thinking. And I remember that being very difficult for me to learn because it wasn't the way that my brain wanted to do things. So as I went through school, there were like little brief windows where I felt like I could really let myself be as fluid as I wanted to be in shows and in art classes and in like choruses and choir practices and things like that. But as I got into high school, it was very much like, this is just like a play thing for now. You can't do this. Like, this isn't something you can do anything with, music or art or storytelling. I was a great writer and from a very young age. And so it was kind of a depressing time because I was confronted with the reality that if I wanted to succeed, or in my perception, if I wanted to not be homeless and have a horrible life, then I would have to figure some kind of profession out that I could be successful in. And my father wanted me to go to school for finance. He wanted me to go to school for business, international business management and finance. I didn't want to go to school at all, at all. So of course, he won that conversation, and I went to school for business. And right around the time that I entered into college, my parents got divorced after 27 years. And it was a good thing. They needed to not be together. And they're extremely different people. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And this is one of those times when it really didn't. And so they They divorced when I was 18. And so I was kind of like thrown into like, I need to work and go to school. So then I ended up going to school online. And I went through the motions, and I was always good at the academic things in the sense of like, I know what you want me to do and I can make that happen.
Yeah.
Like I had my father's like tenacity around some of those things, and my mom's ability to make a list. So I always did well, but it was never stimulating at all. It was always just like, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. So I'm filling in the boxes. So when I graduated college with a degree in communications and marketing, I went and I got an entry-level job. I had been waitressing my way all the way through college, but I went and got an entry-level job for a startup company. And at that company, I realized that I could run the whole company very quickly. I was like, oh, I could do all of this. Like, this is not, so I was like, I might as well just do it for myself then if I'm going to do it. If I'm going to run somebody else's company with a mission that I don't even align with, I might as well just run my own company. And I couldn't see myself. I remember applying for all sorts of different jobs that I didn't want to do the job. So of course I'm not going to get it. Like my whole heart was like, I don't want to do any of this. And as all of this is happening, I had really lost touch with pretty much all of my creativity at this point. So around that same time, I lost 100 pounds. I had been heavy my whole life, and I lost 100 pounds, and I got into the best, I guess you could say, societally acceptable shape of my life, like body shape wise. And I was still very, very unhappy because I wasn't doing anything that I enjoyed. And so after I lost all that weight, I ended up with an injury that made it impossible for me to keep doing the kinds of workouts I was doing. And I landed randomly in a yoga class with this man. I'll never forget my first yoga teacher, like that class that I walked into. His name was John, and he wore windbreaker pants. And so he would like swirl around the room. So the whole class was like, dog. And I just thought that was the strangest experience I had ever had. Every shape that they asked my body to do was weird. I felt weird. Everything was weird. So of course I wanted to understand it. And I went on to learn about energy work. I started doing energy work around 19. I had a friend who fell in love with it, introduced me to it, and I started doing energy work, and I started working with people, and I started teaching yoga maybe 2 years after that. So that's kind of like the arc into my adult life. And like early life, that goes until like 19, right?
Yeah. So you were 19 at the point when you started teaching yoga. You kind of like had the whirlwind of like a college, and then you like found yoga, and then that leads you into energy healing. Now, with energy healing, did you start with just the process of yoga, or like what was the first thing that kind of led you into the magic practice and all of the different, like what was the order of progression of each of those new skills that you started to build?
Yeah. So I had a friend who had gotten Reiki certified. This is actually the first thing that happened. I had lost a lot of weight, and I had a friend that had gotten Reiki certified, and she wanted to practice on me. And she practiced on me, and I started crying, and she wasn't touching me. And this was completely confusing to me in every way. And right around that same time, I read a book called We Are Eternal that was written by a medium who was talking about life after death. And that was like I think my first really deep metaphysical curiosity, existential curiosity. And then I had that experience with her where she wasn't touching me and I was crying. So I wanted to learn. And so I asked her who her teacher was. And I went and I studied with her teacher. And I did a couple of long seminar weekends with her teacher, just me and her teacher, which was cool. And that was my first like certification that I got in the world of spiritual wellness or self-development. And shortly after that was when I walked into that yoga class. It was all around the same time. Like the Reiki happened first, but I walked into a yoga class not long after. And that all kind of happened right around the time I was 19. And I think I was just I was suppressing so much. I was swallowing so much of my pain and the things that I had experienced throughout my teenage years, I think, and being bullied and then experiencing, you know, various different types of sexual harassment, sexual abuse in my teens. I think at that point, by the time that I was 19, was when I was like, I hit that threshold of I have to do something about this, and it's otherwise it's gonna impact my whole life. And I felt like the energy work and the yoga was a doorway for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was definitely a doorway in so many ways.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people that I talk to with energy work and healing and that get involved in, you know, magic practices and witchcraft or spirituality, mediumship, all these things, it's like it to someone that doesn't understand it, it's like not something that you come on it just cuz. like you find it finds you at a time in your life when you're ready to receive it, and
Mm-hmm.
it's such a deep part of all the spiritual people that I know. It's such a deep integral part of who they are, because it's like it how do I want to say this? It's like it shows up at a time when you need it most, so then it becomes really special and very
Mm-hmm.
healing. And I think people that are like really ignorant about witchcraft especially think it's
Mm-hmm.
some like evil thing, like some practice that's like, and it's so the opposite of that. It just is so wrong. Like they don't understand. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like it societally, I view, I mean, this is kind of a big thing, big statement, but you know, a lot of spiritual leaders in the community have talked about, like, you know, the patriarchal system and how
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know, the matriarchal healing qualities of healers, of medicine people, of, you know, those indigenous cultures that a lot of these practices come from, were completely squashed during the colonial times and then projected as evil, because the world was operating from such an aggressively masculine place that there was no root. That was it kept them in power to, you know, push down any kind of feminine divine energy. Um,
Absolutely.
so that like, but like, but like when people find it, I promise, like it's so beautiful and healing and so necessary, and everybody's gonna find it in their own way, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it, and I that's what I also love about the spiritual community. It's like it does. All the spiritual people that I know are so chill, because they're like, you know, you can be a Christian, you can be whatever you want, to Buddhist, I don't care, but like this is what makes sense to me, and so I'm just gonna go do that. Okay, like.
That's I think I found that the more than anywhere I found that amongst pagans, because and animists, who are some of my favorite people. I did have, I mean, I've been now in this, what is an industry at this point now, for I'm 32, and this is from when I was 19. So it's been a lot of years that I've been immersed in various aspects of spiritual community. I'm doing air quotes, right? Um, and I've had a lot of not so great experiences also, where they're just kind of, there's a different dogma. It's still dogma. It's a different dogma. And you're still expected to subscribe to certain particular pillars of belief. And as I have evolved in my practices and I've grown into myself more deeply as a, you know, as I've worked with my own trauma even more deeply too, and in my own somatic body and understanding what's going on in my own system, I've come to have a really big respect for my each individual person having their own sovereign relationship with themselves, with their wellness, with their wholeness, and with anything more that they might experience. Like, I will oftentimes, rather than even referring as universe or source or divinity or anything like that, for me it's just whatever more there is for you. And to some people, as with me, the biggest more in my life is nature. So my more is very much the natural world and my ancestry and my own flesh, blood, and bone, far more than any kind of deity worship or any kind of hierarchy of or spiritual system that has that hierarchy, which is different from what a lot of people believe. And I do find that it's so important for me to really look to nature for guidance in what I am as human, because I think what has happened, and I think that it's kind of leaked into a lot of spiritual belief systems, is you have this duality piece of good, evil, or good and bad person. Like there's these two opposite things that are good and bad. And nature doesn't actually have that at all. We have just everything, right? It's like we don't categorize the predator animals as bad animals. They are animals and that's what they eat and that's how they function, right? So I think that our ancestors, if you go back far enough, a lot of our ancestors had a significantly more animistic perspective. And there's a lot of really great books on this, but significantly more animistic. And kind of what we have now is a kind of Christianized, leaky, altered understanding of our spiritual world that comes through one particular lens, and still really categorizes like there's good behavior and bad behavior, there's good people and bad people. And it really creates this cycle of shame, which is what I experienced a lot of when I had my first abortion when I was 23 years old. I was very much in the yoga community at that time. And I became aware very quickly that the systems of belief could not hold me there at all. It was very much like a do no harm, everyone's vegan. If and it just their belief system couldn't hold me, just like the church's belief system couldn't hold me. And so I went searching at that point for what I felt to be closer to what was true in my experience, because I don't know that I believe even in an absolute truth, but closer to what was true in my experience, which really brought me closer and closer and closer to the land. Like I felt like as years went on after that, my belly got closer and closer and closer to the soil, and I felt held there. And I felt held there in a way that no person or belief system that comes from people could ever hold me. Without shame, without judgment, without condemnation, and all of those pieces. I think even in the like sacred feminine industry aspect that exists now, I do feel like there's a lot of holes in the way that it has the capacity to support real people.
Yeah, there's a lot of bypassing that still goes on, and it, even though it's talking about duality and not plugging into the binary systems of good, bad, female, male,
Yep.
black, white, blah, blah. Like it's still, since I kind of think since the world is still at a whole kind of at that level of dimensional understanding, it's stuck there.
Yeah.
Some people that are moving past that because they're healers for this world and they're bringing these other things to attention, right? It must be very challenging to kind of separate yourself from that and find what works for you and find, how do you find, your connection? And you felt it through the earth because it is, I mean, that's one thing no one can deny, that the earth came before us and that's our home. Like that is a fact. Like,
and that's been the thing for me, is anchoring in a really beautiful balance between the science and the spirituality. And that there's a gorgeous dance. There's a really, really beautiful book called Where Science and Magic Meet. There's quite a lot of really great ones that I've come across, but I love animist writers. I love listening to that animistic perspective, because you don't have to have any particular belief system. And I found that like if you need to believe any specific pillar in order to be a part of a community or be a part of a sector of humans, that in itself seems problematic to me. Like if you have to have a particular belief to do that, then it falls apart without that. And for me, what I'm anchored in is something that no one can ever pull out from under me, right? Like I'm anchored in my own blood, my own bones, my own flesh, the wisdom of epigenetic wisdom of my own ancestry that lives in my blood scientifically and metaphysically, and my kinship to the land and the land of my ancestors. And that to me is the most magical thing I've ever experienced. I think I've done a lot of I've had a lot of conversations on like light supremacy and the concept of like reaching for, or the concept of ascending beyond. It's still a very dissociative practice, and I've seen a lot of people become very fragmented over time. With
of what, being light workers, or what do you mean, like calling themselves something and then thinking they have to?
Yeah, kind of that piece. There's a purity, there's a purity focus, a cleansing purity focus that brings people into this place where they become disembodied because they're trying to go up and out, and they're trying to go up and out so much that their animal body, their flesh, starts to revolt against that. And I've seen that result in illness. I've also seen it result in just a fragmented sense of consciousness that makes it really difficult to navigate the world as it is. And I do think that it's important that we can want to change it, and we can do everything in our personal power to do things, to change things. And we have to be able to navigate and see what we are experiencing as clearly as possible with our objective lens, with our capacity for logic. And then we can bring in, and only then really can we bring in the additional support of a more than human world. Right? Like in my
Right, because after all, we are human.
It's really important. Yeah. And so I think for me, that those practices that I have been deeply exposed to in all of the ways were not supportive for me as a human to deepen, to grow, and to anchor myself in something that feels like a fulfilling existence as a human being, and that I am growing, that I'm truly growing, and not just shaming every decision that I make and comparing myself to some purity or ascended place that I don't desire to go there. I desire dirt under my nails, and to be a human being who experiences the joys and the pleasures of being human and lives while I'm here. And I don't have a fixation on what's next. And I think that that's different from a lot of the perspectives that exist. So and the healing work itself being something that I do think each individual person needs to be responsible for within themselves. And so there's also this disempowerment that has happened in the industry as well, where people are handing their power over to someone else to fix it. And I have a lot of like qualms with the industry itself, but I've kind of found my own corner and built it and said like, this is how I want to do this. And for a lot of people, it rubs up against an edge for them that they're not willing to look under that rug or in that closet, because it would mean kind of being willing to dissolve some of the things that we cling to in order to not feel the pain and the fear of being a human being. So my spiritual work is probably a little different than maybe some of what you've been around, because there's not a lot of me out there that I've found. There's a couple people, but it's very old. Like the concepts that I'm anchored in are very old. They predate a lot of philosophical structures that got built into dogmas. They're very much like, we used to be, heathen, meaning living on the heath. Like we were of the land, we were made of that soil. And to me, like that, to be able to have that ancestral wisdom carry forward without trying to turn back time and make it how it was, because we can't. We just need to remember some of those ancestral wisdoms, then carry them forward into what we have the ability to do now, I think.
I mean, that's the best service that we can do for those ancestral knowledge and that wisdom, is to carry it with us forward, but not get stuck. Like there's a lot of anger of like, it used to be this way, why isn't it this way anymore? And it's like, okay, well, it changes. And it's interesting that you mentioned that sense of like, if people are, and I mean, I'm a person that's super hard on myself, and I'm always trying to change myself and get better. I mean, and that's fine to a certain degree, to want to better yourself, to be a better person.
Yeah.
But if you're, and I'm totally guilty of this, to better myself because I don't think I'm good enough as I am, is not it. That's not, or just wanting enlightenment because I or someone else is like, that's what I know is good, is to be enlightened. That's the goal. But it's like, but then you're not really having the human experience. Like, like I think was it Eckhart Tolle? I might be wrong. That talks about like no ego.
Maybe.
Is that him? Yeah, that, and I remember hearing that concept, and someone at work was telling me about it, and I was like, that doesn't feel good to me. Like, I just doesn't feel like it's impossible. We're human. Like that's gonna be part of it. It's like it's denying your humanity at some points to not accept.
No one suffers from that more than a bleeding person.
Heart.
Yeah. Like it is such a shame, and I have such a relationship with like with womb work and things like that, and just this work with bleeding bodies is like that is in so many of these religious doctrines, there's so much shame, and we wonder why people who identify as women or grow up, identifying female throughout their whole lives, why there's so much more of a really, really horrendous self-image around body function and things like that. And it's like, well, every doctrine basically says you are dirty and bad and wrong. And it's like, it's so,
yeah.
so deep. Like it's so deep underneath that programming. And then the new age spirituality practices are often teaching the same thing with different language. There's still a ton of purification processes, and there's still a ton of like, these are the bad emotions and you shouldn't feel those emotions. And that's not an integrative approach to actual wellness, based on everything we understand about humanity. So like that's not going to support people long term. And it's certainly not going to support them through trauma. So for me, it's been like, I really want to be really anchored in both this relationship with more that I have, that I do believe the human spirit or whatever we're made of has the capacity to have, if that's what's going to contribute to that person's overall wellness. But I do teach and I do work with a lot of practices that are super accessible, no matter what you believe. You don't have to believe any particular thing. There's no specific system of thought that you need to subscribe to in order to be well. And I think that that in itself is problematic. Saying like, you must go on my road is the road, anytime that's the language around it. And honestly, for me, all of the up and out practices have only taken me further away from myself. All the down and in practices have brought me home. And that's been the somatics, the embodiment, the internal family systems, thought processes, the things that have brought me closer to my own nature, my creative practices, all of my magic, which is very much anchored in my relationship to land and watching the seasons and teachers of the land coming to be with you at certain moments. All of that has been a down and in, like, feel my body even more so. Feel what it's like to be a human even more so. Like, that's not the punishment. Being human is not the punishment. And that story to me is just absolute garbage. And I won't, I refuse. No.
I won't, yeah, subscribe to it. And I think that's good, because it's like, I think that's the other thing is that, like, I like to think that everybody's kind of learning and doing what they need to do. That's also part of being human. Like, after all, like, we are here to, like, be here to learn. And then also we come in and we go out by ourselves. So, yeah, it's like, you gotta, I think it's a really good example for people. It almost gives people permission to be like, if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not.
Yep. We long to belong so much that we will follow things without really sending them through our own discernment process and saying, like, is this really for me? Does it really support me? Does it really nourish me? And am I immediately rejected by this space community of people if I reject one aspect of this belief system? Because that in itself is scary. I've really strived in my work to leave many questions unanswered and unanswerable. And that has been, I think, incredibly supportive. I think the people that have found me in the spaces that I've held really, they often say, like, this is one of the only places where people don't just give me unsolicited advice or tell me how I should think or be. I'm like, yeah, that's because it's really important. And I think that's partially, you know, my desire for that to exist in the world, right? Like that's part of where that comes from.
Well, speaking of that community that you've built, and just to have you talk a little bit about how you built the social media platform that you had and kind of moved that into, you combined all the business knowledge that you had and moved it into this very successful business. So tell us about that. Like what was the foundation of that, and how did it develop to where you are now? Like what was the blossoming and unblossoming of it, the tying of the bows?
So I started teaching yoga at a YMCA in Connecticut.
Woo!
And they paid me $20 a class. And by my like third week, there were like 40 people in that class. Yeah, at a YMCA. They didn't even fit in the room. There was like people clunking weights and making weird noises outside. So I started just teaching there while I was still in yoga teacher training. And then I taught at the studio that I was doing my yoga teacher training, and I started teaching at a couple of studios. I was still waitressing at this point. And then my mom needed to sell her house, and she was going to be moving quite a ways away. And I left my waitressing job and the teaching that I was doing in that area and relocated with her. I got out of a relationship and relocated with her. And this was, we moved to this new house on the day that I had my abortion. Like it was a really, really intense like moment for me. I was like, I had the abortion and then didn't go home, went to this new house, this other place that was totally foreign to me, totally foreign town. I was like, I don't know where the hell I am. And it was kind of far away from stuff. Like it was a significantly more farm town type of a place. And I spent a lot of weeks just trying to go, okay, so if I want to teach yoga, how am I going to do this? And I could drive to all these different studios, and that's what I did. A lot of them were like an hour away. So I was driving an hour to teach a class for like $15 or $20 to drive back. It made no sense whatsoever, but I wanted to do it so badly that I was willing to do that. So it started like that. And then I got offered an opportunity to go teach for a month in Aruba with a teacher down there that was willing to let me stay with her and teach down there for a month. And so I went down there not long after the abortion, and I was kind of recovering myself down there. And I was very seriously thinking about staying down there and just teaching. My mom calls me and she goes, I found a place to open a yoga studio. So and I had found like one really cute like whole holistic health food type of a cafe, and I was like, well, how close is it to that, because those are the only people that are gonna come. And she goes, you could throw football from one to the next. And I was like, oh wow, that's cool. So I came back. My mom and I went halves on this rent of this facility that needed so much work. Between the two of us, we put in, using credit cards pretty much, like $50,000 into this. The building was not okay. Like it needed a floor and a ceiling. Like not ready at all. So we poured ourselves into this. We had our grand opening in December of 2013. And the first couple of months that I was there, the first month I offered a month of free classes, and we had like 65 people in these classes because they're free yoga classes, right? And this area didn't have a yoga studio. Or a good one. So I was teaching in the first year in business. I think I was teaching 15 classes a week. I was doing all the marketing myself. I was figuring out all the ways to get people in. And honestly, it did really well considering the fact that it was a brick and mortar yoga studio. It's really hard for yoga studios to make money without charging a lot of money, or being owned by someone who already has a lot of money. And I, didn't do either of those things because I was trying to give something to the community that was valuable, probably because I was trying to be a good person, because we still had that thought process at that time. So I was trying to create this, and in the process, I was hurting myself and digging myself into a really hard place. So I owned that studio for 3 years. And by 2016, I couldn't keep doing it. It was really, really hard. And I basically had run a yoga teacher training so that I could go and take another yoga teacher training so that I could get better. And I had done my 500 hour at that point. And by that year, it was like the heat bills were like $1,200 a month. It was obscene. I was trying to run hot yoga in a building that wasn't built for hot yoga. And so I ended up filing bankruptcy that year. I lost my car. I filed bankruptcy, and shortly after that, this is all around the same moment, right? I had a 12-week-old puppy that died in my arms. We have no idea why.
Aww.
I ended a relationship that was on and off since I was 15 years old. And all of that happened kind of in the same period of time. And then my mom lost the place that she was staying. So I no longer had anywhere to live. So we stayed in hotels for a little while with like riding on the last of the credit card capacities that we had. And my mom had poured everything into my sister and I into trying to help us to do what we wanted to do. And I had done everything that I could do to, like, we were a team. My mom and I were always a team, trying our best to figure stuff out. And so that was a rough period of time. We stayed in my mom's old bedroom from when she was a child for a little while at my grandparents' house. And I got to be with them, which was great. And then someone asked me if I wanted to go to Jamaica. And I had the exact money that the plane ticket cost in my account. And I said, you know what? Fuck it at this point. So I went to Jamaica, and I met the man who ended up becoming my husband for a period of time down there. And I decided that I wanted to be with him. And then he got shot a couple times, 6 times.
What?
He got shot.
He got
Yeah,
shot?
he got shot in a shoe store 6 times. And then I moved down to Jamaica to go take care of him because that was a great idea. So
what the fuck? How did he get shot? He's just like in a robbery situation?
He was just in a shoe store and they came for the owner of the shoe store, and that was how that happened. Yeah. So I had just met this guy, and my martyrdom savior complex is like, go be a good person. See, being a good person has not worked out for me.
Not always the best answer. You know what? When all else fails, don't be a good person. Do what you need to do.
But I learned so much. I went down and I moved to Jamaica, and I set up a Facebook group for online yoga classes, because at this point I had lost my studio. I had lost everything, right? And I was kind of betrayed by quite a few people that used to be part of that community when I could no longer give anything. I didn't have anything else to give. It was like, I'm now empty. And they were like, fuck you for being empty. I've had many experiences like this where I'm like, yeah, it's surprising that I still work with people. But yeah. So I moved down there, and I was down there for almost a year. And in the time that I was down there, I was kind of like building a little bit more of a presence online, a little. And I had this group that was sustaining me enough to live in Jamaica for a period of time while he learned to walk again. And I helped him rehabilitate his leg. And then we moved back to Connecticut, and I ran another in-person yoga teacher training. I ran 2 more in-person yoga teacher trainings in the next 2 years, in 2017, 2018. I think the last one that I did was 2019 in Bali. So I was, these in-person trainings were like the bulk of the money that I was able to make. That was the only thing that I felt like I could offer that would be sustainable for myself. So I did these in-person trainings, and everybody kept asking for them because people who had graduated my trainings were such great teachers that then people wanted to learn from their teacher. So I had a huge influx of people always wanting to learn me to teach them how to teach yoga, basically. So by 2019, I basically got to the point where I was like, I had myself had another abortion in the same year that I was bankrupt and all of that. So that was when I started doing a lot of the research on my own cycles and learning about my own body. Like I got so much deeper into all of those magical practices, all of the witchcraft pieces, all of the bits about embodying my vessel really came in at that point when I had that second abortion. And that whole period of time I was learning, right? So under the radar from 2016 to 2019, I was doing my own learning, reading all the books, digging into all of these things. And then in 2019, I said, you know what? I'm going to make a big library of online courses. I'm going to put the yoga teacher training on there. I'm going to put all these things that I've learned that I had to look in all these different corners. I'm going to put a class about magic and witchcraft and learning about herbalism. I'm going to put a class about yoga teacher training. I'm going to put a class about women's work, about cycles, about our energetics, about all these things, about sacred sexuality. I'm going to put a course about conscious business. And I put this huge library up. The library went live in October of 2019, and then the world did what it did in March of 2020. So much of what I've done online kind of moved into some one-on-one coaching and things like that, and then moved a lot more into teaching about sovereignty and embodiment and personal power, so that things could be very much like it's in your own hands. Like, learn about your nervous system, learn about your own body. That has evolved over the past couple of years, and it's really turned into a brand that represents that personal empowerment and sovereignty. And yes, spirituality in the sense of like, and we think there's more, but we're not going to tell you what we think it is, because it's up to you to find that yourself, kind of thing. So it's turned into that, and we've had so many like amazing online course containers that I think are epic and really iconic in comparison to what exists in the world. Like, they're very much rooted in people finding their own way of navigating their world that actually helps them to be well, which is what's important to me, is that people are actually finding real ways to be well and not operating from their trauma and just seeking ways of, being a part of something, but actually navigating being with some of that and working through those pieces. And then last year, I decided that I was going to move down here, and I opened a travel company so that people could actually have in-person experiences again, because I was like, oh my God, this online stuff is spectacular, and like, we're forgetting what it's like to touch leaves and be in places and sing with people and feel our bodies and put our hands on the ground and stuff like that. And so I opened Hedonism in spring of last year. And then we had our first like official retreat. I've been running retreats for a long time. We had our first official retreat in February of this year, and we had like 45 people. It was fantastic. They all came down here and just explored around the jungle, and they were riding around on their bicycles and just being free, being free and experiencing what freedom can feel like by their own choice, and that was really big. So it's been a lot about liberation and personal power and choice and finding your own relationship to the more. And now, finally, now that I've actually rebuilt my own safety and security, where I feel like I'm taken care of and I'm making enough money to do the things I want to do and to keep growing. Now I'm like, okay, I'm buying a keyboard and I'm taking singing lessons. And now I'm like, oh, all I want is to paint pictures and sing and frolic and dance and move and so it's been a really interesting navigation of like safety and freedom, and then that relationship to pleasure and creativity from that, and like finding the dance between knowing that there's no security other than death. There's no such thing as this, right?
That's true. I mean, safety and freedom and expression are huge. Those have been big themes for me this year as well, and since 2020 really, is like coming to terms, being in the entertainment industry, and that like just being a complete shit show, fucking shit show of beliefs and, telling you to be something, but then really wanting you to be yourself, but actually be this, but then actually like do the, it's just even to touch base on the duality bullshit of what exists in that. I mean, media and entertainment is a direct reflection of where we're at. So, I mean, talk about being in the fucking bipartisan bullshit. That's the best place to land yourself. And as a person that's like, okay, wait a second, I need to feel safe, to feel free within my creativity. My creativity is a baby child. We've talked about this in our lessons too, but it's like, wait a second, I need to feel safe almost before anything else can happen. It's like, how do you, like, how do you for yourself take empowerment, which is what you do for other people, is self-empowerment, self-autonomy, I guess that's like, it's, saying the same thing, but how to be autonomous in finding safety when really, I mean, is it ever really truly safe? No, but like, how do we make ourselves feel safe? How do we comfort ourselves to be able to express?
This is exactly what I wanted to tell you about when you asked me, like, what is a thing that I'm doing right now in the world. We just released our first book, and it's called The Apocalypse Thrival Guide, and it's about nervous system regulation. So it's literally the exact thing we're talking about, because feeling safe is all about your nervous system, and the more you get to know that, and the more you have a relationship with your own nervous system and how you're responding to stimulus, the more we can cultivate that, and then we can make decisions to move us into even deeper, comfort or contentment in our world as it is. And so the idea is that, like, yes, we're going to do everything we can to change the world, and we are not going to sacrifice ourselves in the process, because then we are useless.
Yes. Correct.
So we just made this, and I'm really excited because it came out like 2 days ago, and I'm super, super proud of it. It's like 70 pages long. It's $37, and we are just super proud of how well it came out.
Oh, amazing. Okay, so that kind of brings me to the point of, like, where can people find you and the book and these products that you have for everybody to take advantage of the amazing things that you teach, and like, where can they find you? We'll link them in the show notes below, but just like,
there's a couple different spots. You can Instagram is Wild Essence Magic, or Hedonism Wild are my two business pages, and then I'm Jessi Magick on Instagram. And then we've got the website that will help you find different things. But honestly, if you're just interested and you're not sure what might be the thing, you could always send an email to me. I think that's a nice way to start the conversation. I do have a free Facebook group that is really active and people really love. It's got like 3,000 people in it, and it's fantastic. And I love those people because they really uphold strong boundaries and make sure that they're not overstepping on anybody's space. Like, if you're not asking for advice, I'm not going to give it to you, that kind of a thing. So yeah, there's those places. The book I've been posting everywhere, so it's on my Facebooks, it's on my things, and I'll give you guys a link so you have it. But yeah, or you can come down and be with me in Costa Rica. That's always an option. There's another retreat coming in February of next year that I hope I can talk Sarah into coming to.
Oh my God. So this is one of the most amazing things about teaching and like people all over the world. Cause like all my students all over the world are like, come visit. And my boyfriend and I are like, we really should like do that. We should go up. So I don't know. I'm going to be looking for more details then on the Costa Rica.
I got you. I want you to teach a singing class. I was like, I'm going to ask you like live on the video.
Oh, hell yeah.
I feel like that'd be really cool. And we're doing a lot with like music and art and dancing. There's like multiple different dance teachers. It's going to be a really beautiful month in February. So those are all the ways that you can talk to me. And I know that I spent a lot of time telling you all my story because it's long, but thank you.
That's the whole point. I invited you on. I want people to know your story because you're an incredible person. And you're very inspiring how you basically embraced your own humanity. And honestly, when people hear that, and like, some people need to hear permission to do that for themselves. Like, sometimes all it takes is just hearing one person's story and being like, you know what? Yes. That's why I love doing this, and I continue to do it, and I invite people like you on here so that can hopefully happen for someone. So that's the goal. But I'll see you very soon at a lesson. But thank you so much for coming on today, Jessi.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you soon for singing time.
I'll see you soon. Bye. I just feel so good after recording these episodes with all these people. Like, basically just doing it for me so I can listen to them talk, if I'm honest. Jessi is so cool, and we've connected over our voice lessons, but not to the extent of which a really solid conversation where you're really getting to know someone can connect you. And I'm just so happy that now whoever's listening knows about her and can go check out all of the offerings that she has, the classes that she has online, and possibly any events that she may be holding. So really check out her stuff. All of her information is based in the show notes. I hope you could tell what a wonderfully beautiful soul she is, what a beautiful person she is. And thank you so much for tuning in this week. As you know, as always, please, please, please leave us a 5-star rating
as well as a review. It helps us to get our episodes out to more and more people, which helps to inspire more and more people so these episodes reach them. If you yourself, or if you know anyone who would make an excellent podcast guest, maybe someone that dabbles in a lot of different things, or perhaps is a master themselves at something particularly interesting or is of the arts, please let us know. Email us. We love being in touch with people. And our email address is jackofalltradespodcast2020@gmail.com. Again, that's jackofalltradespodcast2020@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on social. Our Instagram handle is jackofalltrades_podcast. Give us a like, give us a follow. You could see more updates on our guests, fun facts about them, along with heads up about releases of new episodes. And with that note, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. I hope you keep cool. I don't know what temperature it is when you're listening to this, but hopefully not insane like it is right now in New York City. Anyway, you have a wonderful, wonderful day. And until next time, goodbye.